so you can take in all that theory. The second step will be to answer quizzes. We've created some questions to test your knowledge. Next, you'll have to partake in challenges. Here, you'll have to prove to yourself that you can apply what you've learned. You'll go on track and you'll try to beat the instructor's lap times or sector times. Following the challenge, you'll be able to send your onboard replay so instructors and other community members can help you improve. And lastly, you can get involved in the community to meet some new teammates and learn from others. This platform is a back and forth discussion between us, the instructor, and you, the students. If you're serious about becoming the best driver out there, this is the advanced way to learn.
With the Butt Kicker Gamer 2, what you see and what you hear is what you feel. Butt Kicker. The future is feeling.
Ladies and gentlemen, to Suzuka, and with only one round completed, there is a plethora of drivers still trying to get into some early season contention in the PRL LMP3 GT4 Challenge. Delighted to have your company here this evening on RaceSpotTV. My name up in the commentary booth is Darren Thacker, and once again I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Reese Gardner here this evening. And Reese, we're only in round two. There's still so much for this season to get going. So many drivers who didn't necessarily have the best of weeks last time out at Indy. This is going to be really important for quite a few of those guys, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. There's going to be an awful lot of extra results to come here at Suzuka, a rather difficult circuit, and I think pretty much the polar opposite of Indianapolis. You thought that Indianapolis was hard to pass at? Well, Suzuka is even worse. There's just long flowing turns all the way through this racetrack, and I think the drivers, some drivers at least, will be happy to get away from it and go to Road Atlanta.
Yeah, but you could also say that Road Atlanta, it gets a little bit narrower in parts, doesn't it? So it's kind of deteriorated from the nice wide Indianapolis road course that we had to start the season. It's getting a little bit worse at Suzuka, and then a little bit tighter again at Road Atlanta, but a circuit that a lot of these drivers will have done in these cars, and I think they'll be well experienced at many of these circuits. Magny Cours could be an interesting one going through this season, but definitely a very tight calendar and a good-looking one, isn't it, Ruse?
Yeah, very tight calendar indeed. A lot of brilliant tracks to be run over the course of this season. For now, though, we've got plenty to come here at Suzuka. Big race coming up.
Yeah, and before we get into the race, we of course have to thank our PRL sponsors, which include Advanced Sim Racing, owned and operated by passionate sim racers. Advanced Sim Racing designs and builds the sturdiest and most durable aluminium profiles racing simulation cockpits available in the market today. All PRL members will also get a 5% discount on ASR products using the Precision 5 coupon code. RaceBox Sim Racing offers mid and high-end button boxes for sim racing enthusiasts, from the casual game up to the most meticulous sim racing driver. Competitively priced and carefully handcrafted, our button boxes are an enjoyable addition to any sim racing setup. Visit raceboxsimracing.com and get a 5% discount using the Precision 5 coupon code. Butt Kicker products add incredible immersion and realism to every single game. Feel every nuance and truly put yourself into the driver's seat with Butt Kicker. Muradness is a performance lifestyle brand motivated by motorsport and founded by professional race car driver Daniel Murad. Mr. Hedge Sim Racing Photography. Capture your finest, proudest, or simply worst moments from your hobby in up to 8K resolution. It is, of course, a great addition to any sim room. And Advanced Motorsports. Get ready to learn to be fast with Advanced Motorsports. Follow them on all of their socials to become a better driver, and I am sure you can find them on pretty much every single social you can think of, so make sure you get on with Advanced Motorsports. We thank all of our sponsors and getting these series racing, and great to see so many drivers in the lobby into this qualifying session at Suzuka race. Qualifying, I mean, you touched upon how difficult it is to pass here. I think you've got to say that qualifying is going to be crucial here compared to other circuits that we'll go to this season.
Yeah, it's going to be massive. You need to nail the lap. You need to make sure that not only do you have the best spot on the grid that's possible for you, but also get the best start possible, because you fall behind people, it's going to be really difficult to get back past them, even if you're, something like a second a lap faster. The corners here are so long, as you can see on board the McLaren, and there's not much space between those corners to really get a run on your rival and attempt to pass. And most of the corners are not really passing opportunities, like this one up here, the first of the Degners. It's a kink with a harsh curb on the inside and the outside on the exit. And then you got to be careful here coming under the bridge as well. The only real opportunities to get past people are down the start-finish straight, down the straight between the hairpin and Spoon, and then on the way up through out of Spoon up to 130R and then to the chicane. Basically the straightest parts of the track. Everywhere else, you are sitting behind. So if you're an LMP3, you're coming up behind a GT4 in Sector 1, you're not getting past them until you've come through the S's.
Yeah, unless you're brave, or you know how people say that bravery could also be stupidity. I think there's going to be a couple of cases where drivers are going to have to choose something to that effect this evening, because it does get tight. It is tricky to overtake here, and if you are an LMP3, we saw it last week, didn't we, in Indianapolis, as we came through the chicane for the first time through turns 5 and 6, such high speed through there, and there was incident. Yeah, drivers came a cropper. Let's hope we don't see something similar today, but it's another circuit where if you meet them at the wrong point at the start of the race with a big pack, it could get messy, and drivers are going to have to be aware of that and going to have to be careful, there's no doubt about it. But we're into qualifying now, and we are starting to see the first lap times come in. Jason Drescher had set the fastest time, and you can see there the splits between the LMP3s and the GT4s. Aiden Young's gone top before Aaron Myers leapfrogs him. There are two names who, if you've not watched the series before, you're going to get to know pretty quickly, Aaron Myers and Aiden Young. But at the top of the LMP3s, it is looking pretty tight, isn't it? Drescher doing a good job ahead of Zach Hebert.
Yeah, indeed. A couple of notable absences from this round in the LMP3 class, particularly the winner of round 1, Adam Brockway. Unfortunately, Hurricane Helene is affecting him quite badly. His house has been flooded, and so he's not been able to to even get on the sim tonight. Very understandable reason. And Alec Bergstrom, who qualified very well last week, but unfortunately retired. Championship protagonist usually, he is also not here tonight. So a couple of big competitors in the LMP3 field missing from the grid. But our usual suspects at the front of GT4 are all there. Myers, Young and Wyckoff. They are the top three in the championship, though Young is ahead of Myers. So we'll see what they can do, as qualifying is about 4 minutes away from coming to an end. Cade Smith, meanwhile, currently in 7th spot, looking to improve. This is the run-up to Spoon, one of the spots where I expect some passes will be attempted at least, but Spoon's a very difficult corner to get right. You need to get into the apex early and be straight on the exit for a good run down the straight to 130R. And I think 130R as well, Dara, is going to be one of those corners where we'll see some big incidents between the classes if the drivers are not careful.
Yeah, and you've just got to be so cautious, don't you? At some of these corners, misjudgments can happen, and I'm sure they will a couple of times. We just have to hope that they aren't too devastating for any drivers if it does happen to them, because we want to see drivers getting involved at the start of the season. We want to see them pumped up with only a couple of rounds to go and hunting for, you know, titles, for wins at the very least, and, you know, podiums if the season isn't necessarily going to their advantage. But we always like to see motivated drivers here, particularly in this series when there's so many drivers and so much at stake, particularly with some of these guys racing each other quite often. There's bragging rights involved too, so it's great to see so many of these guys do well, and let's hope that we can get through the first couple of passes between the LMP3s and the GT4s without too much of a hitch. I noticed that Mobin Khan going fastest in the LMP3s. These top of the time sheets, of course, took pole, took fastest lap last week, but just came up short to Adam Brockway, who of course, as you mentioned, not able to be with us tonight, and we do send our thoughts to everybody who is affected by the hurricane, of course. Horrible scenes, and I have family in Georgia, so I do know how bad it has been for some, but we hope that everyone who isn't able to race is still going to be able to be with us soon, because it's never great when you're not able to be part of a championship because of circumstances out of your control. We talk about it with disconnections, don't we, Reese? But it's never a good feeling, and especially if you disconnect during a race or you just aren't able to get into the session, it's just not a good feeling, and it's not good for your championship and not good for that motivation at the start of a season. But for the guys here tonight, we wish them all the best, and particularly the drivers who maybe are here for the first time because they missed last week. So good to get some new drivers in.
Yeah, indeed. One of the drivers who's here for the first time is, in fact, Jason Drescher, who currently is in 3rd spot. It will be interesting to see what he can do from here, considering that the first round of the season will be used as his drop round. He's going to be he's going to have an awful lot of pressure beneath him to try and get the best results possible throughout the whole season. I'm interested to see what Michael Diaz will be able to do as well. Diaz, unfortunately, finishing way down the order at Indianapolis, was involved in a crash when the LMP3s came through traffic for the first time. He did end up finishing the race, but only got 35 points from the first round, and a win is worth 54 points. So there's going to be an awful lot of pressure there for him as well. He's doing quite well in 4th spot. Meanwhile, less than a minute left in qualifying, and Aiden Young, it seems, has not been able to grab the GT4 pole from Aaron Myers. When it comes to the race, Aiden Young is the man to beat, but it seems like Myers is giving him a run for his money over a single lap this season.
Yeah, 2 poles in a row that'll be for Aaron Myers. Aiden Young, of course, took the lead on lap 1 last time out. You'd think that he's going to have to do it again, but those two clearing away the top 2 in this qualifying session. You've got Matthew Wyckoff, who is about 6/10 back on them at the moment. So those two doing a very good job. Aiden Young, you may see him on a lap, but he won't be able to get to the line in time, so he will stay in P2, but less than 1/10 of a second, about the time that it takes for you to blink an eye between the top 2. So barely anything in the grand scheme of things. And over a 2-minute 8 lap, 700ths it's absolutely nothing. So rest assured, we're going to see a fight between Aaron Myers and Aiden Young once again. As the timer hits 0, we can show you these finalised qualifying results and present them in the form of what will be the grid for race 2. That's of course a lovely shot of that. We do get some great shots of this track. Of course, one of the only figure-of-8 circuits on the iRacing platform, and another one I think we can all think of is Twin Ring Motegi. Of course, both in Japan. A little bit of a feature, it seems, of some Japanese iRacing circuits. Shame that Fuji can't make it the hat trick, but there you go. Fuji is wonderful in its own way. I think we can all agree. But going into this race, I think a lot of the drivers are going to be thinking about turn 1 and going down into those opening couple of corners. And we're going to get on board with the pole lap, of course, of our pole sitter in the LMP3s. And I think we're going to really see how Mobin Khan has got his LMP3 round this race. He did such a good job at Indianapolis. He's done another good job here at Suzuka.
Certainly has. Very aggressive into the opening corners. Turns 1 and 2 are so satisfying when you get them right. And here in the S's, it is all about gearing up for the run out of the final corner. Every single turn before that is just setting it up. He was a little more aggressive through that left-hander than I would have been, but he certainly carried the speed very nicely. Out of Dunlop then, this left-hander blending to the left, and you come up to the Degner corners. We were on board with a driver in qualifying through here as well. Nice and aggressive over these curbs is Mobin. It seems that Mr. Khan is, well, at least comfortable over the curbs until he got to the exit of Degner too.
Yeah, that didn't look too safe from Mobin Khan. I think there would have been a little bit of worry there for a split second as the car starts to step out from behind him. But nice line through the hairpin, and then you come down this long run in towards Spoon Corner. Just kind of shorten off the corner as much as you can, take as many or as few meters as possible to try and take every single thousandth off. Into Spoon, double apex left-hander, get it to the inside, run it out onto the exit curb, get it back to the inside and try and get the power down. And nicely done by Mobin Khan, using all of the track to his disposal before rising back up the hill to cross back over the track and get towards 130R, one of those fearsome corners in racing, particularly in these cars where, you know, we're looking at the steering wheel. It seems pretty much flat out for Mobin Khan. For the GT4s, it may paint a different picture. Into the Casio triangle, dive it into the left, be aggressive on these curbs, or into the right and then into the left, I should say. Run it out of the final corner, use as much exit as you can, and then again, shorten off that corner to the line. And Mobin Khan, the 64 driver, again, I think 2 poles in 2 weeks from the LMP3 driver. And we're about to see our second pole lap in 2 weeks from our GT4 driver.
Yeah, Aaron Myers of chasing the Delta and the Porsche Cayman. It's looking a lot more sedate and slow than the LMP3s, but trust me, these drivers are working just as hard, if not harder. They don't have the luxury of downforce. It's all mechanical grip in these cars, so Myers just trying to blend his way into turns 1 and 2 here. Ran a little bit wide at the apex as well, but he carried the momentum nicely. And it's even more important to try and set up the end of the S's here. In a car with not as much downforce. You're all over those curbs. You're just being as careful as you like on the steering wheel. Look at Myers' inputs. He's not scrubbing those front tires anywhere near as much as he could. He's just preserving those front tires for the rest of the lap. Suzuka is notorious for being a track that eats tires. You're working them so hard over a race distance. Nice and aggressive over the curbs at Degner as well. And then out on the exit, barely a hint of oversteer from him as he makes his way up to the hairpin, which is one of the prime overtaking opportunities on the circuit in a single class race, the slowest corner on the track as well. And he'll put the power down, and that flat 6 engine will sing on the way up to Spoon.
Yeah, difficult to get the power down out of there, and also difficult to make a move there now. Of course, with the little kink coming into this corner, the wider the car, the more difficult it really is to find any kind of room down the inside. And with such a short braking zone in the grand scheme of things, especially with the uphill aiding some of the braking, difficult to really find any line. But we'll see if drivers can do it during the race. All of the curb, and it seemed like a little bit more there for Aaron Myers on the exit of Spoon, but look at how much he is hugging that inside white line up towards 130 yards, just letting making the car naturally drift back to the right-hand side of the circuit as the track ever so slightly kinks left as you get into 130R. All of the curb on the inside, all of the curb on the outside as well, riding it nearly. The Olympics for the skateboarding was a couple of months ago, but still trying to put in some tricks through the Casio triangle, bouncing through the curbs once again, and getting it once again as close as he can, as tight as he can towards the line. And that is how we saw Aaron Myers take pole position in the GT4s. What a pole position it was, and this is the starting grid then for the race. Mobin Khan will lead us to green, and he's got about a quarter of a second ahead of Boris Angelovando, fresh after his good result last week where he finished in P3. Jason Drescher and Michael Diaz are on row 2. Christian Garaton and Zach Hebert will be just behind them on row number 3. Chase Wilson and Ian Starker, Daniel Oliver and Stephen Lakota, the top 10 on rows 4 and 5, with row 6 consisting of Kyle Harner and Lando Tager, a driver we saw feature quite a lot in last week's race. We'll see what he can do from 12th. Nikol Sanidakis is 13th ahead of Eric Fenson in 14th. Mitchell Booth and Andre Jameson are on the 8th row, with Fernando Rodriguez rearing up the field in P17 after he did not set a lap time in qualifying. We'll move on though to the GT4s, and again, familiar front row to those of you familiar with the series. Aaron Myers though takes pole ahead of Aiden Young. It's Myers' teammate Matthew Wykov in P3. We saw them work well together at Indianapolis. Will we see it again today? Kate Smith will join him on the 2nd row. Michael Terrafino and Justin Bragan are on the 3rd row, and those guys are less than a second off, as are Jeremy Rogers and Kurt Ham after qualifying. Kurt Ham only just finished ahead of Darren Rutherford, who is 9th, with Jeremy Manella just about a second off the pole time at the back end of row 5. Jean-Sebastian Bedard and Francis Castillo Romero are on the 6th row, as we roll on with Willie Brennan and Gabriel Gignac on row 7. Austin McGill and Maxime David are on row 8, but again, tight times before we get to Roy Brown and Matt Benson, who are 17th and 18th on row number 9. Rounding out the top 20 is Caelan Tobin and Lambert Jesse before we find Tristan Cadet, Bradley Beeman, Fennicini and Ewan Brown on rows 11 and 12. More drivers come with a big field here in PRL. Anthony Cortina and John Sherwin are on row 13, with Mikey Smith and Keith Gwinnett 27th and 28th. It'd be Steve Gow and Travis Pruitt who are inside the top 30. And I do believe that is all the drivers we have. It is. You never know, Reese. There might always be the extra one on the end of those. But 30 drivers we have in the GT4s, 17 in the LMP3s. Some easy maths, 47 in total. This is going to be a big old race with quite a lot of action, it's fair to say.
Yeah, I saw just how many GT4s there were, and my heart filled with fear. The LMP3s are going to have a very tough job around here getting around them, but I think as much sympathy should be had for the GT4s with how fast the LMP3s are going to catch them in the first sector. But we're going to have to wait a couple of laps before we see that happen. We're hearing that Aiden Young has not taken to the start grid. He's going to be starting from the pit lane. Apparently, some kind of issue. He disconnected from the server manually, I have to say, and then reconnected just a few moments ago. He should be able to make it out on track, but he's going to have to do a last to first challenge as the LMP3s come around to take the start.
Yeah, and how big could that be in a championship picture with only 9 rounds overall in the season? But at the front in the LMP3s, we've got a Mobin Khan who's trying to revenge his fate from last week. He wasn't able to take the win off of pole, but what a start he's got as we get racing here at Suzuka. The green flag flies for round 2 of the PRL LMP3 GT4 Challenge here on RaceSpotTV, and Mobin Khan looks like he's got a commanding lead down in towards the opening corner. Too wide though, just in behind for P3 and maybe for P4 as we see the GT4s get underway, with Aaron Myers leading us to green. His teammate Matthew Wykov is going to be in this fight as well as they dive down towards the opening corner. But you know what? It might just be a 4th to 1st on the inside. I don't think it will be. But what a move that would be if we saw a bit of a jump off of the line. But in the end, it will be Aaron Myers who holds the lead as we make our way through the opening couple of corners. But it's all nice and clean apart from just at the back of the LMP3s.
Yep, got to be careful running side by side. It's Eric Fenson who unfortunately went off track there in Sector 1. The battle for the GT4 lead still ongoing here. Great start from Cade Smith being able to put himself between the chasing the Delta cars. For now though, LMP3 making their way up to the hairpin. Mobin Khan in the lead, but the teammates of Boris Ovando and Michael Diaz will start working together if Diaz can get past Jason Drescher.
Yeah, and Jason Drescher, obviously not here last week, doing a very good job to try and stake his claim to maybe get involved in some kind of championship picture as we work our way through the season. He's up in P3. Wanted to note as well on Aiden Young, he did get to the back of the field, it seems. You can just about see him on the tower there, 26th place, and trying to work his way up. Only 10 seconds off the lead, but a lot of traffic to work through. But he's not a lap down or anything that could be worse than that. So definitely still a chance for our championship leader Aiden Young, but he has got a lot of work to do, and we'll have to see how early he can start to work his way through the field. Coming to the end of lap 1 though here for 1 hour's worth of racing at Suzuka for round 2 of the season, but realistically very clean at the front in the LMP3s, and Mobin Khan will be very pleased to get away from the rest. Boris Angelovando though does not want to let him get too far away. They were quite close together in the championship after week 1.
Yeah, certainly were. And yeah, you're right. Very clean start at the front of the LMP3 field. Most of the cars have gotten away cleanly, apart from Lando Tega and, of course, Eric Fenson. Well, through the first sector, seems like Mobin is... well, he's got the car down pat. He's starting to extend the lead a little from Boris Ovando. That is what happened to Fenson and Tega. That is very unfortunate indeed. Looks like they came together on the exit of turn 1. Was that Fenson moving over a bit too early? Not sure. Either way, Lando Tega, I think, was just unfortunately not moving over to the right as far as Eric Fenson would have liked. Ian Starker also suffering a couple of issues at the moment in the LMP3 field, but every other car in the class has managed to get away cleanly, and we'll wait a few moments to see what's happened here as well. That is Starker going for a slide coming out of the S's. You know, the LMP3 has a bit of an unstable rear end at times. When it snaps on you, there's not much recovering it, and when it happens in the middle of the S's at Suzuka, it's one of the worst places for it.
Yeah, it looked like he may have got a bit of a tap from the rear. It's difficult to see from that angle, but that may have been something that happened as well. I mean, going too far to the right for his liking, as you mentioned, with the two coming together at turn 1. But only a few minutes gone, you can see in behind. Look at the side-by-side action in the mid-pack in the GT4s. Aaron Myers has got away. Cade Smith is trying to follow, but you can see in behind how close some of these guys are. Michael Terrafino looking at the back of Justin Bragan as they make their way into Spoon Curve. Nothing going there as they dive their way through. Both Mercedes-powered engines, as there is an LMP3 trying to work their way through. I think this is Fenson and Tega trying to recover their positions, and of course these guys aren't lapping the GT4s. This is for overall position after they lost all of that time in the start of the race. Inside at 130, I should see them pass the 4th and 5th man in this train in the GT4s, but Tega's going to have to wait a little bit longer as the GT4s dive their way through. Early stages, but we're starting to see how difficult it is for the LMP3s to make their way through the traffic. We're seeing going left, going right for Eric Fenson, then having to go the long way around at the Casio Triangle and not really working out either. The straight will be where he'll gain so much time, and Teg will hope that he can clear at least 3 of these guys before they make it down in towards turn 1.
Yeah, meanwhile, incident back in GT4 on lap 1, Gabriel Gignac unfortunately getting a little tap around the outside, and that sent him around. Jesse Lambert, meanwhile, down into turn 1, just ran straight off, too deep, lost the rear end, and fortunately avoiding the walls. So we're starting to see some mistakes being made as the drivers try to get into the rhythm with the tyres that still need to get warmed up a little bit. Hopefully that comes down as the race goes on. Keep our eyes peeled on the top 3 battle in GT4. Matthew Wyckoff currently holding off Justin Bragan, and Michael Terrafino would have been right there with him if it weren't for the LMP3 passing at the end of the lap. That Mukau liveried Mercedes is going to have to do some extra work to stake his claim for a top 3 spot.
Yeah, I mean, trying to gain to the back as much as he can, but losing a little bit of time on the last lap or so, hasn't he, in the number 94 car, and if he's not careful, might come under pressure from Kurt Ham in the number 33, but at the moment it's Matthew Wyckoff trying to apply a little bit of pressure to Cade Smith at the moment, who, you know, jumped Wyckoff off of the start after Aaron Myers, of course, was at the back of the field in the GT4s. Wyckoff could have tried to pull away with a 1-2 with his teammate Aaron Myers, but at the moment getting a little bit stuck behind the number 12 car. Quick mention up on Aaron Myers, actually, or Aiden Young, I should say. He's up into P19 now, so recovering quite well, up 9 positions, you'd think, from the back of the field, and doing a good job for the time being, but still a lot of work left to do. This is the battle currently for P7 in the LMP3s. We're not just seeing some battling up front, we're also seeing a little bit in the mid-pack, and a bit of a gap, actually, between Christian Garreton in P6 in the number 57 car, and the front of this train, who is Chase Wilson in the number 5. But you can see 6 cars running quite close together on the way out of Degner too. I think it comes back to this point, Reese, and I don't know if you can you know, help explain it a little bit, but the rhythm that the drivers would need at an early stage in this race really is critical, isn't it? But how difficult is it when you've got so many cars around you to really dial into that rhythm?
Oh, yeah, super difficult. I mean, think about Fernando Rodriguez here, who's trying his best to work his way through. Mitchell Booth, the car he just made his way past. You know, you know what your ultimate pace is, and you had the track to yourself in qualifying. You're able to maximize your pace, hopefully, so you know what's required from you to go the fastest around this track. But then you put a bunch of cars in front of you, or a bunch of cars behind you, who want your position. You've got a lot more to focus on. A track like this with so many high-speed corners, it's critical that you nail every turn-in point and apex, and you can't brake too late. That's a big issue, like Kurt Ham's just done there in the McLaren and clobbered the tyre bundles. That is a big example of not having the rhythm fully sorted. Into turn 1, it's the most critical. You get on the brakes too late, you carry the brakes too deep into the corner, the rear end's going to swing around and off you go.
Yeah, and it's such a difficult corner to nail, but as you mentioned, so important just to get that kind of run in towards the S's. I mean, if you start to lose time there, or as we see, lose the rear end there, you're going to find yourself in a world of hurt, not least if you find damage on the car but want to limp it back to the pit lane. You've got quite a ways to go. Another thing to mention in terms of the pit lane is how long are we going to see the drivers go before we see some pit stops. It's going to be interesting to see who dives it in first, but I think we've got a little bit of time to wait before we get too much into that, but definitely something to think about early on, with some drivers already thinking about a bit of a fuel save to maybe shorten that stop. It's exactly how we saw Mobin Khan lose the win. He pitted a little bit earlier, and in the end his rival Adam Brockway pitted a little bit later, needed less fuel in the car, had that shorter stop, and was able to get out in front without having to make the move on track. So definitely something that I think particularly Mobin Khan is going to be aware of. But leading once again in this race, he's not going to be in the same position to fuel save as he might want to be. He's giving that advantage right now to Boris Angela Bando.
Yeah, Boris is sitting just around a second behind. On board with Zach Ebert, meanwhile. He's very close to Michael Diaz and Jason Drescher. This is the battle for the top 3 we're looking at the moment. You see those little dots in the distance. That's Khan and Ovando, our top 2. Let's see what Zach Ebert will be able to do here. Racing in virtual reality, which will be a little more convenient than a single flat screen for racing in the LMP3s. The A-pillar is obviously quite thick on these prototypes, so your blind spots are quite large. Being able to see around them, so to speak, on triple screens or in virtual reality is a big benefit for a lot of drivers who race these cars. And they're coming up on some traffic as well. Looks like Drescher got slowed up a little bit passing the GT4. Now Diaz is all over the back of him. And what Hebert has to do is just focus on his exits, turn in late, make sure that he's not pushing too hard or scrubbing the tyres on the entry to these corners. It's incredibly difficult to keep the tyres down at an operating temperature at Suzuka, and when you're following someone at these high speeds, aero push comes into the factor, and you'll unfortunately get the tyres blistering by the time you're out of Sector 1.
Yeah, but look at how smooth it is at the moment for Zach Hebert. You could just see him turning the steering wheel. There wasn't too much, well, there was no soaring on the wheel. The lines looked really quite tight. Jason Drescher was being a little bit more expansive with some of his turn-ins, you know, trying to get a bit more of speed through the middle of the corner, but you're going to be scrubbing the tyres a little bit more. You're going to find yourself maybe losing a little bit of performance as we run our way through the race. But what these guys are now going to have to focus on is the GT4s, because we've just seen them coming through the front of the shot there. We are starting to get to the back of the GT4s, and they're fighting. They are not going to be easy to get through, and this is where we're going to see quite a lot of drama. The first sector of the next lap for Mobin Khan I don't think is going to be an enjoyable experience, as we're going to see Zach Hebert try and get through on the inside of 130R. It's going to shorten off his run through the corner, but look at the commitment from the 511. Looks like you can take a lot of speed through there in these LMP3s, and they're not really worrying too much about having to take any off.
Yep. Anthony Cortina in the McLaren, going to stay as tight as he dares through the final corner and allow these two by, and well, these three by, two of them at the front here, looking for a move. Coming into turn one, tiny bit of contact between Drescher and Diaz. Jason's going to try and defend here, but Diaz is super aggressive around the outside. He throws it into turn two, and he's going to have the inside line for turn three. Well executed, but Drescher is going to fight right back, and oh, a little bit of contact. Drescher's off into the wall. And that might be his race done.
Yeah, and that was not good, seeing the front end of that car drift off. He's come to a stop and he's towed it back to the pit lane. It seems that is not good for Jason Drescher whatsoever. And after such a good start, not getting any points last week, obviously not being here, had high hopes but not going to plan for the number 39 car. Quick update that I've just seen on Aiden Young. He's up into P50, make that P40 now, as he changed on the timing tower, as I mentioned it. Threw up into the hairpin though, outside for the hairpin, inside for the little kink goes Diaz and Hebert, but they'll make their way through. This was the view from Drescher. I mean, Drescher will say that, you know, well, I don't know what Drescher will say, but he got onto that curve on the inside, didn't he? Drifted him a little bit wide. Michael Diaz just had to turn in at some point, I think he will say. And we'll have to pick the boat. Well, the stewards will have to pick the boats out of that, I'm sure. But for Zach Hebert, he said, thank you very much, gentlemen. He's up into P3, and he can now be the one to try and chase after the top two, who are working very well together at the front.
Yeah, from Drescher's perspective, you know, put yourself in his shoes. Diaz has been very aggressive around the outside, and you're thinking, I want to keep this position. You know, maybe I can do what he did. I can fling it in around the outside. Unfortunately, that put him on the narrow line for a very off-camber right-hander, and understeer was induced pretty much as soon as he turned in. So he just drifted wide. Diaz, I don't think, would have expected him to understeer as much. So I don't know what the stewards will have to say about that, but regardless, we'll see what Diaz will be able to do. Find his way back past Hebert here. Looks like Zach, though he did get a gap, has been compromised by GT4 traffic up the inside of the Aston Martin of Kalen Tobin. And Diaz will sweep around the outside of him as well. They're coming up to Aiden Young, championship leader here. This is going to be crucial here for Young. He needs to make sure that he lets this traffic by cleanly. Self-preservation is key.
Yeah, and picking his way through nicely, so tricky. We've mentioned it, but you can see it for the first time, really, there. How difficult it can be for these LMP3s to just pick their way through the traffic. You can see it again up here in towards the hairpin. This is Ovando, though, right on the back of Mobin Khan, our race leader, in the red, white, and blue, trying to defend and going defensive into the corner. The 222, not able to make anything work there. Look around the outside of yet another GT4 as they run their way towards Spoon, and they're just going to be thinking at this point, when will it end? They've not got too many to go, though. I think they're coming up towards the back of Jeremy Rogers in the number 58 car. Inside line at Spoon. They get through just about into both the first apex and the second apex. Something's happened to Cade Smith. You can just see him in the foreground there, losing a position to Michael Terrafino. Matthew Wyckoff has had an issue as well, so maybe a bit of contact between those two, but that's not what you want to see if you're Mobin Khan, because you're coming right up towards the back of it, especially as they're going too wide for P2.
Oh. Yeah, goodness gracious. That's a little bit of contact into 130R. Not ideal, as now Mobin's trying his best to find his way past them, but they just have to stay in position. They can't afford to be too aggressive in this section. It's super slow. Wait for the straight, and that's exactly what they do.
Yeah, and we'll see if they can do it down in towards turn 1. They're going to clear everybody now but Aaron Myers, and they've done that with relative ease, although I did think Mobin Khan was going to have a little bit more difficulty when he put half of his car onto the grass on the outside coming towards the Casio triangle, but Mobin Khan does still lead, as he has done for most of this season so far. I think he led about 40 minutes worth of last week's race, and he's led the first 15 here, so clearly being the driver with the target on his back, but you've got to be winning towards the end, and Evando will know that he can let Mobin Khan lead for as long as he wants. As long as he can get that position towards the end of the race, it will not matter in the slightest. Here they come on the back of Aaron Myers. Through goes 1, through goes 2 before Degner 1, and they've got a little bit of time now where they can relax, but they can't relax for long because the back of the GT4 field is not that far up the road. It's only about another 45 seconds up the road as they will run their way through up in towards the hairpin with a little bit more ease this time. No more GT4s to try and overtake.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of GT4s in this field today, twice as many GT4s as there are LMP3s. I just want to point out this puff of smoke that we saw at Spoon on the last lap was all started by Cade Smith, unfortunately clipping that curb there on the outside between the two corners. And that resulted in Wyckoff running in and making a little bit of contact. So that's what started all of that saga that we saw on the live pictures. Regardless, for now, Khan and Ovando well and truly into the clear air right now. The next car up the road, in fact, is Ewan Brown, who's just coming up to the Degners. So, you know, we've got plenty of time for these two to duke it out at full speed. But we're just not sure who's the best on overall pace, because I'm looking at their best lap times. Mobin Khan's best lap is a 1:54.4. Boris Ovando, a 1:54.5. So not much between these two at the front.
Not at all, and it's good to see that we have this battle raging on at the front of the LMP3. It's good to have quite a few championship contenders, isn't it, in this category. And we've got Zach Hebert in there, who has done a good job in the past and doing a good job at the start of this season. Christian Garreton, Diaz, Wilson, all of these guys are going to be in with a shout-out for the first couple of weeks. And it's good to see, as you said, the pace being really quite tight. I wanted to quickly touch upon our man who is currently up into P13 after starting at the back, and that's our championship leader Aidan Young. You can just see there, he's 15.3 seconds off the lead. He was 10 seconds off the lead at the end of lap 1, which means he's lost 5 seconds to Aaron Myers. But when you realise that Matthew Wyckoff has also lost 5 seconds to Aaron Myers, whilst overtaking, to my count, 15 cars, that means that Aidan Young has kept exact pace with Matthew Wyckoff at the front, just showing how good he can be and how far up the field he could get. He's already passed pretty much half of the field. I'm not quite a third of the way through this race. I think we're going to have to try and have a bit of a guess at some point, Reece, as to where we think he's going to get to, because at this point, you're looking at very much inside the top 5, maybe even a podium if he can get a little bit lucky.
Yeah, it's crazy pace from Aidan Young right now, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he'll be able to do. Just up behind Cade Smith here in the Mercedes, we've got the two McLarens battling of Jeremy Rogers and Darren Rutherford. Jeremy Manella in the Porsche Cayman just behind them. All of these drivers together and looking quite entertaining, has to be said. It won't be too long, I think, before Aidan Young comes up on these guys, maybe through the pit cycle, depending on how things go. Another thing that you can take away from Aidan Young's pace there is that Myers and Young are still incredibly close on pace, and if they were up at the front together, I think they'd be duking and diving pretty much every single corner. Meanwhile, looks like Boris Ovando has shown his hand. He's just gotten the fastest lap of the race, but it's only a mere 0.03 of a second faster than Mobin Khan.
These are tight margins, aren't they? I mean, over the course of the lap, if you put that in terms of distance over this lap, that's far less than a metre. It's absolutely nothing between these guys. Yeah, great to see these guys duking it out at the front. Zach Hebert doing his absolute best to get himself involved in this, and he has gained quite a good gap, to be fair, to the likes of Michael Diaz and Christian Garreton in behind him. So it's becoming a little bit of a three-way fight if Zach Hebert can try and pull his way into this a little bit more. That gap fluctuating just about the 3-second mark, but it is looking like it's getting, well, as close as it has been been for a little while now. He was only a couple of tenths off on the previous lap, and that was without any kind of benefit of slipstream or anything like that. But Zach Hebert definitely in this fight, and you cannot count him out just yet. 20 minutes gone then in this second round of the season of the LMP3 GT4 Challenge here in PRL, and we are starting to see some interesting stories develop. Of course, we don't have our championship leader coming into this in the LMP3s that we've touched upon in Adam Brockway, even though I have seen him in the chat, so great to see Adam watching along. But it means that we've got Khan and Evander, who are second and third coming into this race, fighting it out for a win, just as we would hope to see. And the GT4s, I'm thinking about the likes of Matthew Wyckoff, of course, coming into this P3 slightly off the back of his teammate. You know, kind of played an assisting role last week after Aaron Myers had some difficulties on the opening lap, trying to do a good job himself this week, getting caught up in a couple of, you know, very minor skirmishes, just costing him a little bit of time. He's going to want to get to the back of Aaron Myers, but at this point, or at this moment in the race, you kind of say he's trying to stay in P2 and kind of fending off any kind of challenge from any in behind who could try and get after Aaron Myers, but it looks pretty safe at the moment for what could be a 1-2 for the team.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see how things work out in the pit stop cycle. And also wanted to note that as Wyckoff exited Spoon there, the outside tyre left a thick black line on the way out of the corner. So Wyckoff is pushing hard there. So he's got to make sure that he keeps it within a reasonable margin for error. Of course, he's got that trio of Mercedes and duo of McLarens chasing him down here, but all of those cars on screen at the moment in that little line, they're all battling for position here. That's second to eighth in GT4. I'm amazed after 20 minutes complete of the race so far, these guys are still as close together as they are. It's quite magnificent.
Yeah, great to see as well. Great to see, I know I mention this all the time, but the liveries are great here in PRL. The drivers really do a good job in the off-season with painting up their cars, and some of them do look absolutely, or most of them, look absolutely stunning. And I do like a nice, clever little livery as well with Terrafino's cow-themed, clearly, livery, looking quite great on the racetrack right now. Back up, though, in towards this LMP3 battle. This is the kind of pack we were talking about before, now headed by Chase Wilson for P6. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 flying through the frame, and Daniel Oliver trying his best to get onto the back of Stephen Lakota as they come towards 130R, but they'll dive their way through. No moves there to be made. This is a tight little pack at the moment. Strategy could come into play, but I mean, at this point in time, would you think about an undercut here, or would you try and go longer, think of the overcut, and try and shorten off that pit stop?
Yeah, that is the big question, right? But you've also got to factor in traffic. It's especially difficult to negotiate traffic at Suzuka. You don't want to pit too early and potentially put yourself right back in with the GT4s, because then you'll lose a ton of time just getting back up to speed. So yeah, honestly, if I was in the position of any of these drivers, I'm not sure what I'd do. It's a difficult track to negotiate, but oh dear, that looks like a little problem there for one of the Mercedes, Ewan Brown. I believe he only recently came out of the pits. No, that was a different car I was looking at. Brown, unfortunately, having his own little issues there, as he is a bit more GT4 traffic for this battle. This is what happened to Brown. It was contact.
Yeah, I mean, not much contact, but when you are going at that kind of, steering angle, it doesn't really take much to spin the car around, especially if the car on the outside's got that little bit of extra pace. It's going to tap you into a spin, and disappointing there, but yeah, not much I don't think that the GT4 could do in that scenario, and just a slow spin around, and it's just the worst kind of spin, isn't it? Because you can feel the car starting to go, and it's just such a slow move of the track in front of you disappearing from your peripheral vision. But I think hoping to come back stronger there will be Evan towards the back, or Ewan Brown towards the back of the field. Still in this LMP3 battle though, at the moment. 5 cars flying through frame. Christian Garreton kind of being dragged into it now, losing a little bit of time over the last couple of laps, and you can see him now heading this train of 5 as they get through 130R. Maybe a little bit of a move there from Daniel Oliver, but the 24 will stay exactly where he is, as will the P2 man in the 222, Bryce Angel Lavando, looking to try and cement his P2 in the championship, which he would pick up if he was to finish in this position. I'm seeing a theme here, is
Yeah, I am too. Boris is definitely a fan of the number 2. Okay, yeah, that was unintentional on my part. Coffee's still kicking in, yeah, this is a great battle here for the lead. You know, these guys are trading lap times, and you know, one lap one of them's going to be a little faster, the other lap Avando comes back at Khan and has a proper run at him. A little bit of traffic coming into the hairpin might fall into Avando's favor here, you never know. Khan is going to have to stay behind Kalen Tobin here in the Aston Martin just through the hairpin, but vaults up on the exit. I love the V8 engine that these LMP3s have. It's a lovely throaty roar that these machines have, which you wouldn't expect coming out of a car like this. They're diminutive little things, these LMP3s.
Yeah, but you know, the smallest cars can give the throatiest roar, can't they? I think, if memory serves, when I was at you know, a Formula 1 weekend, the Formula 3 cars were very, very loud. So you know, they're not the biggest cars either, but they can pack a punch. And the LMP3s are kind of in that same kind of category in terms of the sound that they produce. And it is great to hear them pound around this Suzuka circuit at the moment. I noticed in the chat that Adam Brockway has been typing, and he said fuel save. I think that was in reference to what you would do on the strategy. And of course, Adam Brockway, fuel saving last week to his advantage, and that is why he took home all 55 points that he could. Well, I mean, he could have taken 57. Of course, you get a point for fast lap, a point for pole. But in the race, 55, the maximum you can get, and Brockway doing his best job, and it worked out for him. I don't see why it wouldn't work out for the likes of Avando if he wants to do that same strategy tonight.
Yeah, that is correct. Fuel saving is what you need to do. Looks like Zach Hebert has decided to be the first to blink in the LMP3 front-running section. He's just come into the pits there and getting his pit stop done. We've already seen one pit stop from the LMP3's last lap for Daniel Oliver. It was 17 seconds stop for him. Zach Hebert, 16.5 seconds stopped in the box. So that's the benchmark that we'll be measuring every other pit stop by. Hebert, not much of an opportunity to fuel save in the early part of the race, so his pit stop might be a little bit longer than he wanted. It may very well cost him.
Yeah, and before half distance in this race as well, so hopefully that doesn't bode badly for him not maybe being able to get home in this stint, but you'd suspect that, I mean, he should be able to fuel save at least to get to the end, even if it's looking a little bit touch and go, but he will have to recover from P11 at the moment, even though there will be everybody else coming into the pit lane, of course. In the GT4s, though, pit stops, they're going to be on the minds of some of these drivers, particularly Justin Bragan, particularly Michael Terrafino, as they still tail Aaron Myers in the number 22 by a gap of now 7 seconds, as that just continues to grow out, and he disappears ever further into the distance, becoming a mere speck on that lens down in towards turn 1 now, as they do fan out a little bit as they make their way towards the opening corner. A little bit of cool air wanted into those engines possibly, but you know, the slipstream is so critical for these cars. They're going to need as much as they can when it comes to the straights. Oh, as there's a driver off, no one at the front. I was worried for half a second it was Aaron Myers, but someone further down the field. I was going to say, there's not too much room for slipstream on this track with so many high-speed corners like the opening sector. You really need to take all of it that you can, don't you?
Yeah, indeed you do. Try and just stay as close as you can through the twisties, and then when you get to the straights, take advantage of the slipstream and get a little bit closer. Lift off into the braking zones, fuel save a little bit, as we've been discussing. That car that we saw spun on the outside of turn 2 was Anthony Cortina. He just lost the rear end and spun by himself. Almost cleaned up our leader Aaron Myers, but there was enough of a gap on the inside for Myers to get through at racing speed. So no harm, no foul for that particular incident. For now, though, more pit stops happening in the LMP3s. Christian Garaton has just come through the pit lane, and he's come out just behind Zach Hebert with I think around about 20 seconds between those cars. The fighting still going on for what is now P5. Chase Wilson has broken away from Stephen Lakota and Fernando Rodriguez. Fernando with a magnificent run up through the field so far. He's up 11 spots. That's the most of anyone in LMP3, and almost the most of anyone in the entire field.
You know, our two drivers that started in last, Fernando Rodriguez and Aiden Young, doing a stellar job to try and recover what was left for them after qualifying. And I say after qualifying, even despite Aiden Young's P2, of course, starting at the back with the disconnect that he had, and doing an incredible job. The last time I saw him on the tower, he was up to P9, and just there we go. You can see it there, continuing to rise in the 427 for the for the reigning champion in this series from last season. Even though the races were a little bit shorter, so you can take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt, but absolutely not when you can see the form that himself and Aaron Myers have carried over into this season's racing. Again, though, we're following this battle with Matthew Wyckoff. He's doing a great job to fend off the likes of Justin Bragan and Michael Terrafino for the moment. Wyckoff hasn't been keeping up with the pace of his teammate Aaron Myers for the time being, albeit only losing a couple of tenths per lap. But it's doing just enough to hold up Justin Bragan, but not allow Bragan any kind of opportunity to look for a move and lose them further time, because that yellow and green car has had barely a sniff at P2.
Yeah, it's still been a good race from Bragan, though, hasn't it? He's been consistent, he's been clean, he's been able to keep himself right in the fight. These are the overall leaders making their way through on him now, and Aiden Young stands a chance of making up another spot here on Jean-Sébastien Bedard. These guys competed in different series last season. Young, of course, was still in the LMP3 GT4 Challenge with the old shorter race format, and Bedard was competing on Thursday nights in the GR86 MX5 series. This Mercedes GT4 a little bit faster than the Toyota GR86 Cup. But Bedard is making sure that he stymies the progress of Young just a few more corners, but up the inside at Spoon goes Aiden, and I think Jean recognizing, oh no, I was going to say recognizing that he was faster, but he's going to have a go at him at Spoon again. A little bit of contact, Bedard goes for a slide, but again manages to recover nicely. In the midst of all of that, we also saw pit stops for Michael Diaz and Stephen Lakota as well. Diaz, crucially, has come out quite a ways behind Zach Hebert there. So Zach, I think, still solidly in the race for P3 in the LMP3 class.
Yeah, and doing a very good job there at the moment, and it's great to see so many names that we're talking about in these fights, as so many drivers involved and so many guys getting themselves into a good position and getting themselves into some contention. Ian Snarker not having the best of races so far, it's fair to say, especially after that spin that we saw him have, or the little tap he had. It's still unclear as to what happened exactly there up towards Dunlop, but still only about 35 seconds off the lead and doing a good job with it as well. Zach Hebert back up into P5 as the 221 of Rodriguez comes into the pit lane after he, of course, started in last place. So a story there as well. Nikos Sanadakis, another name that we haven't touched upon much, but didn't have the best of qualifying. He's not pitted yet, up into P4 in the 717, and that's because in the LMP3s with their 17 cars, we've got pretty much double that in the GT4s, and so many more storylines as well. Going to be interesting, I think, just to see how far it can be pushed on the strategy by the likes of Myers, Wyckoff, but I'm thinking particularly of our man from the back, Aiden Young, who is now up into P8 and still out there on the circuit. I mean, the longer he can go, you think the clearer track he's going to have, and he may be able to do an overcut on a couple of the other drivers that he'd be looking to get past and maybe get himself into that top 5.
While you were saying that, there's been a big incident for P10 in GT4. Francis Romero and the McLaren, Austin McGill and a Porsche Cayman, unfortunately coming together into Degna 1, and there's a big incident happening up ahead there. There's a car off, and GT4's battling hard here. Oh dear, this is not ideal for anyone in this situation. Hopefully they negotiate this one cleanly.
Yeah, it was Sanadakis who got towed there. You can see him in the pit lane. He got towed to the pit lane. I think he was facing the wrong way as they made their way towards Spoon. Through comes Starker on 1-2, and hopefully for him 3 GT4s, but they still continue to fight in this battle. They are 3 that you could cover with a blanket, quite frankly, down in towards the 130-yard corner. This was the contact. Romero going wide. Oh, sorry. Romero going off the track, another car going wide. Yeah, McGill, that was then off into the gravel as Romero gets himself back onto the circuit. And big disaster for those two as they're side by side between Oliver and I think that was Caraton through 130R. And Oliver's through. The number 90's got around as well as they come in towards the Casio Triangle. And that is not a nice place to get the car righted.
Yeah, it's John Sherwin in the Mercedes there. What happened to him? Just catching the curve on the outside of 130R. I've made that mistake plenty of times. It's so tempting to go across that curve, but there's a little dip just beyond it. Meanwhile, Mitchell Booth, mad contact there out of Spoon. Again, the exit curves and a lot of these corners, it's so tempting to run out wide, but there's plenty of bumps, plenty of divots out there that can unsettle the car.
Yeah, we're starting to see quite a lot of contact. Oh, was there maybe a move for the lead as that car coming into the pit lane? There was a change for the lead. Mobin Khan has lost a lot of time.
Oh,
I wonder
actually,
if that
it's a spin.
Yeah, it's a spin. Yeah, that's massive then for Mobin Khan. Made the mistake all on his own through Spoon curve. And that has handed Evander a massive advantage. Yeah.
It's those outside curbs, man. Like, I think, yeah, you know, it's so tempting to use that curb to widen the entry, but look at this. He just catches it, and the rear end snaps on him. And that's the lead lost for Mobin Khan. This is 2 races in a row that something has happened to Mobin Khan to lose him the lead.
You say that there was possibly an element of distraction from the GT4 in front of him where the apex was. I think he may say that he was looking more at that car, looking for the next corner, and didn't really realize how far across he was drifting. But disaster for the 64, albeit he should still be relatively okay in P2 overall. It depends where he comes out in comparison with Zach Hebert, as he is now in the pit lane. But Ovando, what a position that the number 222 has now found himself in. Comes into this race 4 points behind Mobin Khan. It'll be 5 once you add the point for Mobin Khan for pole, but he is going to be gaining some points, and that championship battle is going to be tight if Ovando can get this car to the end.
Yeah, certainly will. Mobin Khan's pit stop was 20 seconds. Oh no, Stephen Lakota getting spun around there. And where is Stephen at the moment? He's all the way down in 11th now. Looks like it might have been Lando Tega making contact with him there. Lakota just out of the pits with a very long stop indeed. And it looks like Zanadakis and Booth there stopped, and with plenty of damage in the pit lane. Meanwhile, Kalen Tobin in the middle of a battle here in the Aston Martin with Jeremy Manella behind. Darren Rutherford just up ahead. This is what happened here to Stephen Lakota. He was actually trying to make the move there on, I believe, might have been Rodriguez at 130R, and then, man, Mercedes in the tyre bundles at the final corner for Maxime David. Looks like the no-team of Maxime David and Jean-Sebastien Bedard, at least one of them, not having a great time today. And it is a BMW that David is driving. One of a few BMWs in this field, but none of them seem to be having much luck today.
Yeah, and whilst that was happening, just on the inside, if anybody was looking at that, a monumental battle between Manella, I believe this is, in the GT4s, looking to try and find a move up through the opening sector, not going his way, as we see one of the LMP3s come through and just about get it stopped into Degna 1 before we see, or before any kind of contact with the car in front occurs. That'll be a nice move from Andre Jameson to make his way through. Mobin Khan has come out behind Zach Hebert after he made his stop and has just overtaken Ian Starker for P4 overall, albeit Starker still needs to make his way down into the pit lane. But Mobin Khan against Zach Hebert is now the battle for P2, as Chase Wilson also requires a pit stop. Boris Angel Ovando looks like he should be okay in the lead, depending on how long a stop is, depending on if anything goes wrong. But at the moment, it's Hebert versus Khan for P2. I also want to touch upon the battle in the GT4s. Aiden Young, 17.8 seconds off the lead. Cade Smith, you will remember, was fighting for P1 into turn 1, is now only 2 seconds ahead of Aiden Young. Both of them require a pit stop. I think Aiden Young is now legitimately net P5 or net P6 or P7, I do believe. So it'll all shake out in the pit stops. We've only got 20 minutes left, but we're in this kind of phase, aren't we, where we don't really know exactly where everybody is, because we need to work out where everybody's going to come up with the pit stops they have to take.
Yeah, and complicating things further, Matthew Wyckoff had a spin in turn 2. So, unfortunately, that has lost him a bunch of time as well. Bedard and Gignac in the pits for GT4. This is what happened to Wyckoff. An outside pass from Daniel Oliver. Really unsettling Wyckoff, it seems. Carried the brakes a bit too far. The GT4 cars do have ABS, but it seems like the rear end locked a little bit there for Matthew Wyckoff. So now he is under threat from Smith, Jeremy Rogers as well in the McLaren. And there's Aiden Young in the fiercely forward yellow and black Mercedes, looking at 3 potential positions right in front of him.
Yeah, this is looking fantastic for Aiden Young. You know, when we saw him drop to the back of the field, I thought this may be one of the only times this season we don't speak to him. But I might have to change that thought, because he still might get onto the podium here in the 4.27. He is 2 seconds off the driver who is legitimately in P2. I mean, this has been an absolutely stellar drive from Aiden Young, who is looking to take the title that he won last season. Chase Wilson into the pit lane, Ian Starker into the pit lane. We're getting into the final stages for the pit stops in the LMP3s. How long is the stop, though, for the number 5 car? We will see as he gets it out of the pit lane. It's still going to be ticking up. It's going to be more than 13.6. More than that, it's going to be 18.6 in the end. Quite a long stop for the number 5, maybe longer than he would have wanted, especially with only 20 minutes left on the clock, less than that. And he will now come out in P6 behind Daniel Oliver.
Indeed, and with that, we only have one of our LMP3s left to take the stop. Meanwhile, the second place battle in GT4, 3 of them come in. Jeremy Rogers and the McLaren staying out. Car 58 will complete at least one more lap here. We are inside 20 minutes to go in the race, and everyone jumps on into the pits here. Now, who's going to get the quickest pit stop of these guys? Aiden Young's will have been pushing an awful lot, but working his way through traffic is a lot of opportunities to save a bit of fuel into corners, so he might get the jump here if he has a shorter pit stop, but he won't. Away goes Matthew Wyckoff and Cade Smith. Young's going to come out behind them. Meanwhile, just behind them, seeing that Austin McGill and Roy Brown making their way into the lane. There's Kalen Tobin popping into the Aston Martin just behind, and so they get back to racing action. Out comes Aiden Young. Darren Rutherford not too far behind him, but I'm sure Young will be eyes forward and focusing on his fellow Mercedes of Cade Smith.
Yeah, we'll have to see if Cade Smith can do much about Aiden Young. But Aiden Young, P7 at the moment. He is going to be driving hard to the end of this race. Michael Terrafino, you'd probably say is his target at the moment with the rate that he's been getting through, but he's got a few drivers between himself and the number 94. He is only 5 seconds up the road. I say only. Aiden Young will, I'm sure, back himself to try and close that down, but he needs to make moves effectively and quickly if he is to do that. 17 minutes are left on the clock. With a Vando's pit stop, he has got that 6-second lead. It would require quite a mistake, but Zach Hebert, a shout out for him really, with the consistency that he has had. He kind of benefited from the incident that we saw early on in the race to get himself up into P3, and of course has kept it calm, kept the pace high since then. Was towards the back of the top 2 and dropped away as they worked together in the opening stint, but is doing an absolutely stellar job now in P2 with Mobin Khan's issues, and looking quite safe in it as well.
Yeah, Hebert also with the quickest pit stop of anyone, and matching Boris Ovando and Christian Garaton for quickest time through the entire pit lane. It's been a good one from Zach Hebert so far. Let's not commentators curse him. Meanwhile, our GT4 leader is in the lane, Aaron Myers, as well as Jeremy Rogers too. So that is going to cleanse the field. Everyone has taken their pit stop now. Myers is away, 19.2 seconds the time for him. That's roughly in the margin for what we've seen for Terrafino, Bragan and Wyckoff, and no pressure at all for Aaron Myers. He exits with a completely clear track behind him.
Yeah, he just needs to try and get this car home, and that's all he really needs to focus on with 15 minutes left to go. Easier said than done, of course, as Jeremy Rogers drops a few positions. What's happened to the number 58 car?
He's just come out of the pits.
Yeah, I was going to say, unless he's just come out of that. I was going to say he's not losing that much time, but he's dropping down the order. But he's come out just in front of Aiden Young, and that is not what the 427 would want to see. He's going to have to make light work of this McLaren as they make their way through the S's. You're not going to find a way through there. Well, if anybody can, Aiden Young can, but not going to be able to do it this time around, and it's going to be frustrating the man in the Mercedes, but there's just nothing he can do at the moment. Going to have to wait a little bit longer to try and get himself into that top 6 after starting back in P28.
Yeah, it's been a tough one for Aiden Young so far, but he's worked his way up into a potential top 6 in the GT4 class. Jeremy Rogers, fresh out of the lane, more fuel in the car now. He's gotten back up to speed very nicely, but here comes Young up the inside into the hairpin. Rogers sees him coming, runs wide to let him through, and this is another opportunity here for Rogers to potentially gain more positions. He has lost one, but he knows how quick Aiden Young is. He'll be able to slipstream him, and that might give him a chance to get past Cade Smith.
Yeah, I mean, he will know how good Aiden Young has been because he will have known he disconnected, so will therefore know he started at the back. And the fact that he's now finding it for P6 may either be a surprise or make him realise that, hey, I think I need to follow this guy. He's clearly got the pace. He clearly knows how to get through. And if he can push some of these drivers offline, the likes of Cade Smith, the likes of Matthew Wyckoff, then it could give an opportunity to that McLaren to pick a way through and to maybe gain a plucky position or two from where he currently is sat. That is seemingly the strategy. All he has to do is stick with Aiden Young, and I think that is the easiest task for anybody in this GT4 field for him to try and manage. But we can already see Aiden Young straight on the back of Cade Smith, and he, I'm sure, will be looking for that move, maybe at the hairpin, as we get there next time around. LMP3 traffic coming through as well, as it always is, but that will confuse the battle just a little bit. But it's quite a nice little feeling to find themselves not having to fight into turn 1 as the LMP3 gets through down the main straight. But that is, we just saw Fernando Rodriguez fighting. He's the other driver that started at the back of the field in the LMP3 category, and he's also fighting for P7, so a nice little synergy there.
Yeah, Christian Garrett on the car up ahead of him here. These two had reasonably close pit stop times, actually 2 seconds. That's a country mile in pit stop terms. Rodriguez with a much slower stop, it seems, but wasting no time being on the back of Garrett on here to try and get back into 7th position. Rodriguez has driven well pretty much all race so far, and maybe a little bit of traffic will fall into his favor. There's plenty of battles going on all around this circuit. Jameson and Hahn are also fighting for 12th position in LMP3. And the battle for 2nd in GT4 is one that I'm monitoring very closely. Currently, it's the dairy-inspired livery of Michael Terrafino, as Aiden Young, it looks like, has just gotten past Cade Smith there and into 5th place. Young has been unleashed, and he might be able to catch up to these three here: Terrafino, Bragan, and Wyckoff. Right now, 2nd place for Michael Terrafino. The pressure is on for him because we've seen the pace that Bragan and Wyckoff can bring out.
Yeah, and we'll have to see if Aiden Young can try and get himself into those podium positions. Not far off it now. It's just really, can he gain up to the back of these top guys before the end of the race? And 12 minutes ago, you'd be hard-pressed to doubt him. But we'll have to see how he can do it with the laps starting to tick away. I mean, Michael Terrafino, I can think of many a cow-based pun. I will withhold myself for the time being, but he has done a great job in getting through the pit stop phase by gaining a couple of positions. In the number 94 car, quietly going about his business, hasn't he? He hasn't really been one to make a daring move to the inside or the outside so far in this race, but been calm, collected, and very astute on the strategy, and it's put him in a fantastic position to pick up as many points as he can in what is the 2nd race of the season for a driver that came home P9 last week.
Yeah, and Terrafino was one of the cars I remember noticing having a couple of spins and maybe some contact with LMP3s as well at Indianapolis. So this is a nice little comeback for Mr. Terrafino. Meanwhile, Wyckoff trying to mount a bit of a comeback of his own. Remember that Wyckoff started incredibly well in the GT4 class, but suffered a bit of contact and I believe a little spin at turn 2 as well earlier that we managed to catch on replay. So he's trying to mount some kind of comeback here. He's right on the back of Justin Bragan now, not quite close enough for a run into the hairpin, but with 10 minutes still remaining on the clock, plenty of time to mount that attack. He goes in very deep, and if anything, it looked like Bragan was a bit slow into the corner. That's not what Wyckoff would have wanted.
Yeah, not looking good at all for Wyckoff as they will make their way now through towards Spoon, but not comfortable in that number 4 car. And again, may not be too pleased at the fact that he's dropping off the back of his teammate a little bit further than he would have wanted to. Of course, Myers and Wyckoff really started this race in a great position to try and be 1 and 2 out of the opening corner. It didn't materialise, and it's been a little bit of a struggle from there. Wyckoff did hold that second position for a time, but has dropped back a little bit over the pit stop window, but still currently holding off Aiden Young. And if he's going to have to do anything in this race, it will be keep Aiden Young behind, particularly for his teammate Aaron Myers, who we suspect and we almost know for sure he's going to be fighting in the championship with all the way to the end of the season. But we are really now seeing time disappear in front of us. Less than 10 minutes to go. And for these guys in the GT4s, I mean, we're looking at, what, 5 laps left? Maybe 6, if depending on where they are compared to Boris Angel Lavando?
Yeah, something like that. We'll see what they can do in those last 5 laps. Only 9 minutes left on the clock now, as Wyckoff goes as deep as he dares into the opening corners. The curbs here, of course, are Formula 1 standard, but not quite the curbs that you see on modern F1 circuits. They're rather rough, these curbs, and that's just a view of what it's like for a GT4 driver in the S's. You see the LMP3s come up on you in your mirror, and you're like, what do I do? I mean, obviously hold your line. That is all you really can do as a slower class car. The LMP3s will work their way around you regardless, but the closing speed and how the LMP3s pinch the GT4s through that opening sector, it still boggles my mind how any of them are able to cope.
Yeah, the pressure is insane for some of these guys. It's been absolutely ridiculous. Aiden Young, let's see it again. Getting a tap.
Oh, no!
There's nothing he can do, and that is Chase Wilson hitting him around. And Aiden Young's incredible drive from the back of the field has been stunted quite heavily. He is now dropped down to, I believe, looking at my time, he's in P8 now, so he's only lost a couple of spots, but going to be hard-pressed to get ahead of Jeremy Rogers now. Darren Rutherford a couple of seconds up the road, but Jeremy Rogers 6 seconds away. I think that will be that. But still a great drive. I think it'll just leave a little bit of a sour taste in the mouth for that to have happened. If you told him at the start of the race he'd get P8, I think he'd be very pleased, but maybe not given those circumstances. But if you're Aaron Myers, yeah, you've got to feel a little bit down that maybe you're not going to get your championship battle that you may want, but you've got to have a little bit of a wry smile. Because that's going to help him out a little bit all the way through the season, really.
Yeah, it's an early big gap for Aaron Myers in the points. That is, if he finishes where he does. Remember, we've still got a bit to go in the race, and anything can happen. But yeah, it's still very early days. It's a 9-week season at Precision Racing League, and this is only week 2 of the LMP3 and GT4 challenge. So still plenty of permutations left to work out as time goes on. View again of the second place battle in GT4. Terrafino is holding nice and strong on to second place. His last lap time was a 2-minute 10.4 versus a 2:09.8 for Justin Bragan there. So Justin making up a little bit of extra time on the last lap, and a little bit of LMP3 traffic is going to stunt both of them a little through the S's. Need to keep an eye out for Wyckoff as well, because he was the fastest of these 3 on the previous lap.
Yeah, and Wyckoff doing a good job to try and really apply the pressure to Bragan, and Terrafino now not got the worry of having Aiden Young behind him, can go full attack and try and reclaim a podium and maybe even a P2 in this race behind Terrafino and Bragan, who are having very good drives at the moment. I mentioned Terrafino was P9. Bragan really wasn't anywhere to be seen last week, didn't finish the race in his BMW. So if he can get to the end, he will pick up points. I've noted as well, he got 20 penalty points in that race. So will get himself back above 0 with this result, and will get himself back into a conversation of at least the top 10 in the championship. With this kind of performance, he would fancy himself at getting towards the top 5. But going to have to defend from Matthew Wykov, and this is where you really get your mettle tested, because Matthew Wykov is no driver to be flippant about. You've got to be aware of where he is, because he can spring an attack anywhere, and he's looking very keen on the back with only a couple of laps to go.
Yeah, certainly is. A little bit of grass there for Bragan. And yeah, it's interesting that you note he was in a BMW at Indianapolis. I suppose BMW in this round stands for Big Mercedes Wide or something like that, because have a look at how wide that Mercedes is as Wykov now stands a chance of getting past into the opening turns. The traction is there for the Porsche Cayman out of the Casio Triangle, side by side down the straight. LMP3 passes them in the process, and there goes Wykov up the inside of turn 1. Can he keep the rear end under him into turn 2? Just trailing the brakes, trying to get the fronts to grip up, and the move is done for Matthew Wykov.
Gorgeous work from the number 4 driver, looking to get after Terrafino in the P2, and Terrafino's going to have to be careful of Wykov, who looks like he is coming into a good little purple patch in his purple car in the last couple of laps in this race. Looking good, and maybe we're going to get a fight for P2 there. Looks pretty set in the rest of those positions in the top 6 for the time being, as Aiden Young closes in for P7 once again. We'll keep an eye on that as we run our way through. But another quick mention of the LMP3. Well, actually, here is Aiden Young, I should say, looking for that move. There's LMP3 traffic coming through. There's actually LMP traffic fighting each other into Degner 1. It's all getting a little bit messy then as we get into the closing stages. I think one of those drivers in the LMP3s is a couple of laps down, so not really fighting for too much, but will now go for the move. That's going to prevent Aiden Young from going for the outside line. Tricky, as he nearly has a little bit of contact with the other of the LMP3s, working their way through the hairpin, but now on the exit, the power of the prototype should see it through towards Spoon.
All right, here we go then. Last few minutes of the race approaching, and Aiden Young stands that chance of getting past Darren Rutherford here. Look at the time he makes up on the brakes here. Young's just so much more confident on the front end coming into this corner. The speed that he's carrying is immense, and the Mercedes, being front engine rear wheel drive, definitely has good traction out of the corners as well. But for the time being, that McLaren of Darren Rutherford looking rather slippery in a straight line. Can't quite get the move done at 130R. Rutherford might make a mistake here. He's lost a little grip on the AstroTurf, has to allow the LMP3 through as well. And he's narrow on the way into the Casio Triangle. Well, Aiden Young will try and get the traction down, but again, it seems like Rutherford is just able to get out of the corners a little better.
It looked like Rutherford tried to hold him up a little bit as well in the middle of the corner to prevent that run that it looked like Aiden, I should say, was going to be able to get down in towards turn 1, and maybe a little bit of smart defence from the number 13 to keep hold of P7 with time really now at the essence. Oh, hello, there's an LMP3 appearing on the screen. I'm sure Aiden Young was aware of him. We went with that camera angle as they now make their way in towards the S's, but nicely negotiated by all parties as we do now start to tick under the 2-minute mark. Where is Boris Avando? He's lapping around 1 minute 54. I think he's just crossed the line, so I think we could get 2 more laps depending here, and that is what Aiden Young would want. Outside of Degner 1 is not where you're going to find a move. Is he going to go for it down here? He's going to push the 13 to the inside, keep committed around the outside. Degner 2 is not going to help him, but he's going to get the up and under through the corner. The acceleration towards the hairpin. Can he make this on the stoppers?
Oh my goodness, he can't quite get the move out of the corner. He's going to have to wait again. This is a great defensive drive from Darren Rutherford right now, keeping the championship leader behind him. This is magnificent battling, but we saw how fast Aiden Young was on entry to Spoon last lap. We'll see if he can get it done this time. Rutherford once again moving all over the track to try and defend. Young sees the door open on the inside, and he gets alongside on the way into the first part of Spoon. Bit of contact on the way through. Rutherford still holding on to the outside line, but Young will just be able to slip past on the exit. There's still a bit of overlap. I'm amazed that Rutherford is keeping his foot in it here.
Inside line for 130R should favour Aiden Young. Will he be able to do it? Oh, there's contact. There's a GT3 on the inside, GT4 on the inside. It's made there's contact, but they still keep it going through 130R. Rutherford still fighting it out as they get towards the Casio Triangle. Has to concede in towards the final couple of corners. My, oh my, that was a massive moment. That was so scary for both, all three drivers involved, really. And Aiden Young just getting it through.
Big point to make. That car that was damaged was Justin Bragan.
Oh,
Justin was racing for the podium, and he's gotten major damage from contact at Spoon with Lando Tega. Lando just coming through here. Bragan exits the corner, and oh man, that I don't think that was too good from Lando Tega there. You don't want to go to the outside on the exit of a corner in the LMP3 because the GT4 has to take that wide line out to the exit. Oh man, Justin Bragan is going to be none too happy with how that ended for him. What a shame.
Yeah, especially with so many points looking like it was in his back pocket. Cade Smith, though, will happily inherit P4. Going Rogers up to P5 and Aiden Young back there on the constant tower that won't be ticking around up in P6. I mean, with everything that's happened, to still be 27 seconds off the lead is impressive, but we are on the final lap. And Boris Angelovando, we haven't really talked too much about him in the grand scheme of things, considering that he's leading the race, but that's just because he's been so consistent, isn't it?
Yeah, beautiful consistency from Boris Ovando. He missed out on taking victory at Indianapolis, and he has some fantastic pace underneath him. Whenever you're in a wings and slicks car with a stiff suspension, Boris Ovando is there, and he certainly has some magnificent pace on board this car. Just a couple more cars to make his way past. That's the battle continuing between Aiden Young and Darren Rutherford for what is now P6 in GT4. But just a couple more corners now to go for Boris. He's managed to nail the pit strategy, avoid making mistakes. Like you said, picture of consistency.
He will come to the final couple of corners. It was a podium last time out at Indianapolis. It's put him in a good position for a championship charge, and he's going to extend that charge tonight with a win in round 2 here at Suzuka. It's the 2-2-2 of Boris Angelovando, who wins round number 2 of the PRL LMP3 GT4 Challenge in the LMP3 class. It'll be Zach Hebert who follows him across the line in P2, and it will be Mobin Khan, we think, to hold on for P3, but he's not far ahead of Michael Diaz. We're going to have to wait quite a while for the GT4s to come through, but it does mean that Aiden Young has finished in P6, and what a recovery drive that was from him.
Yeah, brilliant drive indeed for Aiden Young, but the battle is still on here between Matthew Wyckoff and Michael Terrafino for second place in GT4. A podium is almost guaranteed regardless for Terrafino, but if he can just hold off Wyckoff, a little bit of a distraction there. Coming out of Degna 2, that's Matt Benson, who's unfortunately found the wall in the number 69 BMW. And this is how it happened for him. Yeah, well, I'm not too sure exactly what went on there, but he ended up getting head on into the tire bundles in the end, and that destroyed the front of his car. But a run to the checkered flag for Wyckoff and Terrafino. Is there anything that Matthew can pull out of the hat here?
Yeah, we will see. Through Spoon Curve for the final time, we will go. We've had some team fans in the chat all race long for Aaron Myers and Matthew Wyckoff. Will they get something to cheer about just at the end of the race? He's got the slipstream. He looks like he's going to be gaining down in towards 130R. Unlikely to make a move there. Or is he? Inside line for the purple and green car of Matthew Wyckoff. Can't make it there, and he's not looking like he's going to have the run. But Terrafino goes wide. He looks like he's under attack. He's vulnerable as Matthew Wyckoff looks for the outside into the Casio Triangle. He's dancing his way through, gonna block off the line on the exit, and on the final corner of the final lap, it will be Matthew Wyckoff and his contact who gets it for P2. Matthew Wyckoff just, but by the barest of margins, 26 thousandths of a second, and actually Jeremy Rogers gets P4 ahead of Cade Smith as well. all of that behind Aaron Myers, who cruised to victory in the end. But what a dramatic closing stage of that race.
Wow, the 1-2 for chasing the Delta. Finally, what a recovery from Matthew Wyckoff. The last few laps went really well for him, and he just brought out the aggressive side when it counted. But Aaron Myers should be very happy with his victory there. We'll see what happened once again here between Wyckoff and Terrafino. Around the outside of the Casio Triangle, just shoving himself through the door. And Terrafino had a better run out of the corner there. You can see he was bumping Wyckoff all the way to the line, and they were so close at the end. That is the gap at the start-finish line. Barely a third of a car length in it. If the start-finish line was just a few meters further back, Terrafino would have gotten it. But for now, let's go through our results.
Yeah, we can catch a breath while we go through these results, because what a race it was. 32 laps it was, which took Boris Angel Lavando to his first win of the season in the 222 car, and I believe, by default, therefore, will take the championship lead. That's because Zach Hebert finished in P2 for his first podium of the season, ahead of Mobin Khan, who came into this race as the leading championship contender, who was here this evening. Michael Diaz was fourth, ahead of Daniel Oliver, in a very classy P5, ahead of Chase Wilson, who was P6. Christian Garreton was seventh, ahead of the man who started last, Fernando Rodriguez, who came home in P8. Stephen Lakota had some issues, finished ninth, along with Ian Starker, who finished in P10. Lando Tega had some issues at the end of the race, but finished in P11 on the lead lap. The same, though, cannot be said for Kyle Harner and Andre Jameson, as they were a lap down. Problems throughout the race for Drescher, Sanidakis, Mitchell Booth and Eric Fenson meant that they were 4, 13, 13 and 27 laps down respectively, but I'm sure they will come back a little bit stronger when we head to Road Atlanta. In the GT4s, it was Aaron Myers who won out in a realistically comfortable display, led from lights to flag, but all the action was behind him. Matthew Wyckoff in second, just edging out Michael Terrafino by the barest of margins on that final lap. Jeremy Rogers is in P4 ahead of Cade Smith, who was a long way back from that top four, but managed to solidify that P5. Aiden Young started last, a lap down, championship leader coming into this race. It wasn't a lap down, sorry, but he was a lap down because he didn't quite get to the line in time. Ahead of our overall leader, he finished sixth. Dan Rutherford was edged out for 7th. Jeremy Minella, Willie Brennan and Gabriel Gignac were in the top 10 come the checkered flag before we roll on. Francis Casilla Romero and Roy Brown 11th and 12th, ahead of Jean-Sebastian Bedard, Kaelan Tobin and Bradley Beam on the top 15. It was Kurt Ham, Travis Pruitt and John Sherwin, the other drivers, just the single lap down for Justin Braggon and Matt Benson. Braggon, who of course had those issues at the end, were 19th and 20th. Tristan Cadet, Ewan Brown, Steve Gow were the other drivers 2 laps down, with Lambert Jesse 3 laps down. Then drivers who really ran into problems: Austin McGill, Anthony Cortina, Maxime David, Fenacini, Mikey Smith and Keith Gwinnett. The last two, I do not believe if they were even able to take the start in the end. But what a result come the checkered flag from so many of our drivers, but particularly Reese, you've got Boris Evander to speak to.
Indeed. Congratulations, Boris, on the top step of the podium after third at Indianapolis. That race went incredibly well for you. Picture of consistency, but it didn't come easy.
No, it was a tough race. The traffic was really, really difficult. Those big trains of GT4s and just getting by without losing time to Khan was just really, really difficult, very difficult. But and then I was able to stay concentrated, didn't make any mistakes, and got that win.
Yeah, Suzuka's quite a difficult circuit for traffic, but also just on your own in general. There were quite a few curbs around here that claimed some victims tonight. Any particular places where the car felt really unstable?
One place where I really wanted to avoid taking any risks whatsoever was Degner 2. So I was very, very cautious, very early on the brakes, paid off. I was a little risky coming out of Spoon, and sometimes when you get out too wide with the LMP3, that curve can really just upset the car and spin you around. And it almost happened to me, actually, 2 times. So I got lucky on that. As far as the GT4 traffic, one thing that I didn't want to say was, for the most part, it was pretty good. But there towards the end, it didn't seem like some GT4s were keeping the racing line. I think it's just really, really important to keep the racing line, because it just causes a lot of issues for the faster class when you're not predictable and staying on the racing line.
Yeah, very important point to make. And Road Atlanta, of course, next round of the championship. Pretty similar circuit to Suzuka, at least in the first half of the lap. What are you expecting from that round?
That's one of my favorite tracks. I think that's a favorite for a lot of people, so I'm looking forward to it. T5 is going to be the key, I think, with this car. Just getting over those bumps consistently, time after time. So many laps because it's such a short lap. We have a setup going already from Ryan O'Connor. He helped us out with a setup for today, so just want to give him a shout out and thank him for his work.
Brilliant stuff. Boris Ovando joining us there. Thanks very much, Boris, and hopefully we get a chance to chat to you next week.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you. Have a good night.
Great win from Boris Ovando. Meanwhile, in the GT4 class, Dara, it was Aaron Myers who came away with another victory. Perfect start to the season.
Yeah, Aaron, well done. Welcome in. 2 poles from 2. You got the win this time around. I mean, from our position, it looked like you had it under control. How was it out there today?
I'm glad it looked like I was under control. It did not feel under control. It was definitely really slick, and managing traffic was definitely the biggest hurdle.
But I mean, the start of the season has gone relatively well for you. You must be able to build on a little bit of that confidence. You talked about the traffic for a second there. Where were the difficult spots? Was it tricky, would you say, than last week? I'm guessing the answer is going to be yes, but why was it tricky and where was it trickiest?
You know, to be frank, it was really the whole track. I was getting passed by some prototypes where I didn't expect them to pass, so it definitely took a lot of cooperation between both me and the other prototypes, and I think that goes for the rest of the GT4 field too.
Yeah, but again, great result for you and for the team. I mean, a quick word on Matthew, because he got that move for P2. That must give a great boost for the chasing the Delta crew.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. To get it done in the last corner on the last lap, my hat's off to him. Super stoked for Matt.
Yeah, and it's great to see both of you guys working together well during the race as well, which is fantastic to see. Next week, Road Atlanta. What are you looking forward to? When do you think you can take a back-to-back winner?
I hope so. Road Atlanta is another favorite of mine, so I'm looking forward to next week. Absolutely.
Good stuff. Well, congratulations, Aaron. First win of the season. We're looking like it might be more, but we'll see if you can get it next week at Road Atlanta. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, guys.
Aaron Myers there, our winner in the GT4's great championship battle that I think we're going to have all season long through that particular class. But as we move up very quickly, Reese, I noticed that you've got Zach Heeb to talk to, who, of course, first podium in the season in the LMP3s.
Yeah, congratulations, Zach.
Thank you. That was probably one of the crazier races, just with all the traffic trying to fight through on the first and second go-throughs. But thank you so much.
Yeah, obviously quite a rough race indeed for the LMP3s, having to work your way through that traffic, particularly in the opening sector. What was your reaction on the start there? Because it seemed like you were right on the attack.
I was trying to pick a line into turn 1. It seemed like Jason was either slow off the start and didn't get as much of a jump down the straight. So I was trying to pick which way to go through. So I decided to follow, I think it was Michael through on the outside. And Jason kind of washed up a little bit. So I slid in there and then just kind of understeered out into Michael a little bit. But it was kind of on the attack, trying to make sure, because normally through up until the first go through for traffic, fighting up until that is when the field starts to space out. So I was trying to keep as close as I could up until that first go through and then have the race settle down a little bit.
Well, once the race did settle down, it came down to the pit stop cycle. What was your strategy approach here? There was a lot of focus, I think, on fuel saving from a lot of drivers and making sure that you came out in a gap so that you weren't compromised on the outlap.
Yeah, I knew the setup I was running wasn't the greatest at full fuel, but like I said, once about 20 liters burned off, it got considerably quicker. And then coming through, I knew traffic here was, depending on where you catch it, you can lose, 3/4 to a second to a second and a half a lap. So I figured if I could pit early, try and do an undercut, and work through traffic while the car was still full-ish of fuel. And then once you get out into clean air where you can, start to run more or less normal lap times, that was kind of my approach. So like I said, we did the undercut. Like I said, looks like we got Mobin on the pit cycle. But again, it looks like Boris just had a lot of pace tonight. Like I said, so at the end we kind of caught him, I think, just with how he caught traffic. But in the end, like I said, the traffic just kind of benefited him more, I think, tonight.
Well, regardless, still a massive run from 6th to 2nd for you here at Suzuka, and potentially a sign of things to come in the LMP3 and GT4 Challenge. Thanks for joining us, Zach, and best of luck for Road Atlanta.
Thank you so much. We'll see you guys next week.
Brilliant stuff from Zach Hebert. Well, that looks like it's going to conclude runnings here for tonight, Dara. Another great round of the championship. I'm loving this new format. So much to talk about over an hour race.
Yeah, it's really great, isn't it? I'm delighted that we've been able to upgrade it just the length a little bit and get more guys involved and get more of the storylines. It is great to see. Reminder that coming out of this week, we will have our Drivers' Championship leader in the LMP3 be Boris Angel Avando. He'll have the target on his back, as will Aaron Myers when we get towards Road Atlanta. That'll be in 7 days' time, and we really do hope you've enjoyed this race more than enough to join us in 7 days' time. My thanks to Reese Gardner, who's joined me, Darth Thacker, up in the RaceSpotTV commentary box. We've had Hugo Luis pushing all the buttons, making the broadcast look wonderful for us this evening. We hope you've enjoyed the action. We hope you join us again next week, but also for the rest of the week in PRL racing action. It'll be the fixed and the sprint, or it'll be the sprint series, I should say, and the GT3s tomorrow. Make sure you tune in here on RaceSpotTV. We'll see you then.